Let's turn your attention to more reaction now to the big story from yesterday. Spending cuts and a wage freeze are on the cards, but government has found money for South African Airways. It's a true tale of robbing Peter to pay Paul, some say, as the finance minister cuts spending across national departments amounting to about 7 billion rand while funding SAA. The midterm budget painted a bleak picture of a country in the grips of a severe recession. Debt is spiraling out of control at around 82%, while the income tax is shrinking. Was this a satisfactory budget? Let's get you one take. Bring in Project Director for Tax at the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants. That's Dr. Sharon Smulders, who joins us now from Linz in Austria. Doc, thanks very much for your time and welcome to the AM Report here in South Africa. You must have been watching from where you're at. Let me begin by just getting your first impressions on the budget. Is it much of what you expected, or are we in more trouble than we initially thought?
It's a sad story. I think it's the same thing over and over. I listened to a whole lot of commentators yesterday as well, reading the documents again. It's the same story, the same policies. The problem is promises are made and they just never seem to be kept. And I think that's affecting the credibility of our government. That is affecting the management of our SOEs, which is causing huge headaches for the country. And that is leading to us having to go to foreign entities now to obtain debt. We've been lucky that we've kept our debt mainly local, keeping interest rates quite low. But that is now changing rapidly. And we now have to go externally to get this debt, and that is going to cost us a lot of money going forward. So it's not really what we wanted. I heard somebody say yes, and I tend to agree with it. It's a budget that's more like a problem statement rather than an action plan of how we are actually going to solve these problems. I think if we listen to the economic recovery plan by the president, he kept saying that more details will become evident in Tito Mbowene's budget speech. I didn't see enough details coming through in the budget speech to make that action plan or that economic recovery plan workable at this stage.
Absolutely. In fact, many people still having a lot of those questions they had whilst walking into that budget unanswered after Mbowene's speech. But you speak about debt. One of the issues that really stood out yesterday was the prediction of a 95% debt to GDP ratio in about 5 years' time. Those are really scary numbers.
Yeah, it's definitely scary. And if you look at there's a graph in the documentation, you'll see that South Africa is excessive in the amount of debt. We've got more than triple the amount of our peer economies. We are really exceeding the levels compared to any other country, especially our developing country rivals. So it is unprecedented. It's not sustainable. How we're going to manage this is really the key issue here, and that is ensuring that government expenditure is not only maintained but reduced and spent on things that are absolutely only critical to ensure that there is an economic revival, which will then ensure that jobs will be created and so tax revenues will be increased and then we'll be on a sustainable path. But until we get expenditure under wraps, that's not going to happen anytime soon.
Several things also did come out of the budget, though, yesterday. The finance minister going on to mention that there's going to be a tabling of tax bills. I'm not quite sure how much you know about these tax bills, yes. And if you're able to speak to us about what the net effect on taxpayers is likely to be on the ground, so to speak.
Yes, so no additional taxes were announced in this budget, and it's not usually announced here. So they just confirmed that there will be an additional 5 billion rand of tax increases next year, coming up 21-22. That will increase then to 10 billion the year next year, 10 billion thereafter, and another 15 billion. So over the next 4 years, there'll be 40 billion rand of tax increases. Now, the details of where these taxes will come. Is it an increase in VAT? Is it a wealth tax? Is it the solidarity tax that a lot of people are talking about? That specific detail we'll only know in February. So government is still working on that. We're not sure where it's going to come. A lot of talk around a wealth tax. And that is, I think, the only option of where to go, because our taxes from South Africa perspective worldwide they are high. We can't increase taxes a lot more. So a wealth tax most probably, but that might force a lot more foreigners to not invest in South Africa. A lot of people might be exiting the country, and our tax base is small. It is really small, and forcing those individuals to pay more is quite worrisome.
Given that then, Doc, how best can South Africans make adjustments to their own personal budgets to respond to this midterm policy statement, given the predictions that perhaps more revenue might be sought from already over-indebted South Africans in the forms of increased tax?
Yeah, look, South Africans, our debt and our savings are atrocious. I think we've got one of the lowest saving rates in the world. So we need to urge South Africans to, again, as our country has to do, we need to tighten our belts. We need to only spend on what is absolutely critical, yet we need the spending, which is ironic, to get the economy going. But we do need to spend on things that are important, that will create jobs and that are a necessity. At this stage, from a government perspective, that is on healthcare, it is on policing, and I see policing in the budget that has been reduced. If we look at the biggest salary cuts that the minister mentioned, that is coming from healthcare, from the police and security. It is coming from learning, which is concerning. So although we are expected to, employ more people to get these functions working, their wages are the biggest losers in this regard.
Yeah. You speak about wages. Labour been very quick to react yesterday to another major talking point, the slashing or freezing of public sector wages. It's no surprises that, of course, Labour will push back. The question becomes now, how best does government try and negotiate this very delicate balancing act? Did the finance minister really have much of a choice insofar as this is concerned?
Well, I think, they made certain commitments and those do need to be honored, but circumstances change and we need to all be realistic about that. And I think the big thing here is paying for something if you're getting a service in return is not a problem. But if we had the corresponding service coming out of the payments that we're making, I don't think we'd be sitting here having this argument. So I think unless we up the actual service delivery for the payments that we are making, we cannot give in to paying more to government wages. We've seen that spending money on, like we said, education and security and health, if it's not spent wisely and if the services aren't being delivered and we're not getting the bang for buck, that is not sustainable. And we cannot continue to do that, no matter what and how sensitive the matter is. We have to make sure that we get a return for our money. And at the moment, that is not happening. And so until we fix that, until we have accountability for spending, if we look at our municipalities, the Auditor General's report is shocking. How we can let that continue and continue for so many years is inexcusable. And that needs to stop.
A lot of attention also been given on government spending more money. I remember in the build-up to the policy statement itself, Peter Mboweni being urged to spend more in order to revive the economy. The point he made yesterday is that for every rand we used to spend back in 2009, I think is the year he referred to, the country used to make about 1 rand and a couple of cents in the form of GDP. According to him, that's no longer the case. For every rand we spend now, government apparently makes less than a rand back in the form of GDP. Is this then a call to change strategy? Because that's the point he was making yesterday, that we can't necessarily continue in the same trajectory, at least insofar as what some civil society organizations have been saying.
Most definitely. And that gets back to my previous point, is that you can spend, and we're not saying government shouldn't spend. They should be spending, but they should be spending on the right things. And they should be getting a return for their money. And that's what he explained yesterday, is that we are no longer getting a return for our money. And we cannot keep spending if we are not getting this return, if we're not getting the services, if we're not getting the jobs that are being created. So until that return on money is taking place, we cannot spend. The government cannot spend. So unfortunately, their track record is a bit dismal. So relying on government to get the economy going, to a certain extent, we have to. But I think we do need to make it easier for the private sector to come here and to help. And I think what was quite encouraging is their willingness now to engage with the private sector, to work with civil society, to work together to find a solution. Because doing this independently, none of us are going to make it. So we need to come together. We need all the best minds to come together. We need people to advise the government to get a clear step-by-step action plan. And I think I listened to a lot of people, after the economic recovery plan. It's great, it's all good, but we don't have clear steps. We need actual specific actions with a delivery date and a person that's responsible, and that needs to be monitored constantly. I heard about government meeting every 2 months. That needs to happen a lot quicker. A lot of the interventions that government is bringing in is not something that's going to happen quickly, but we need to force it now. We need to push the issue. We need to accelerate the pace at which we want this reform to take place. We've got no time for complacency anymore. This is really a serious situation.
Oh, absolutely. Well, perhaps government's openness to collaboration is the silver lining amid this dark, thick cloud that we'll have to end on. Thanks very much for your insights and for coming onto the AM Report. Certainly appreciate your take on this. Dr. Sharon Smulders is with the SA Institute of Chartered Accountants. In fact, she's a project director for tax. Thanks very much indeed for your time.